You know Gusteau from Ratatouille? You know who I'm talking about, the ginormous, enormous, huge, lovable chef. But what if he was none of those things? I'm talking skinny, tiny, and unhuge. What would happen? Well, to say it simply, it would be catastrophic. If you're presented with a situation where you can take food from a skinny person or a fat person, which food are you going to take? Let's be clear for a second. Being fat is like having a certification in food. Once you're fat, it becomes a trade. You know the stuff. But if you're skinny, you know nothing. You got metabolism here, metabolism there. No one cares. Fat people are better at food. And if Gusteau's not fat, then he doesn't know food. Think about Thumb Guy. Think about Anton Ego. What do these two guys have in common? They're skinny. What else do they have in common? They're both aggressively violent. Thumb Guy can kill you in an instant, and Anton Ego can kill you with his voice, so it's basically the same thing. But then Skinner's also violent, but he's not exactly skinny. He's just proportionally small. So what does that mean? Point 2b, small people are violent. Chef Skinner is portrayed as the bad guy, and he's small. So that means that skinny and small people both fall into the violent category. So what's the takeaway? Well, it's that Gusteau is neither short nor skinny. If he were small or skinny, then that would mean that he's violent. And if he's violent, that means Remy doesn't look up to him as a mentor. Thus, none of Ratatouille happens. Remy does not become a chef. Articles say that Gusteau died of a broken heart, which is just a fancy way of saying heart attack, really. What that means is Gusteau died because his heart couldn't pump enough blood to everywhere in his body because of his voluptuous size. If he was skinnier, he would still be alive because the heart would still be able to pump blood to everywhere it needs to be, if he were skinny. However, he's not. And the passing, unfortunately, resulted in the loss of a second star. The more mass someone has, the more weight there is pulling down on the body as a whole. This is why you see fat people have just massive legs. However, an ignored detail on Gusteau is how his ears come down as a result of his weight. Being used to how a character looks is very important in any movie. If a character randomly changes, then it's weird. Imagine a movie where they switch out the voice actor of a character in the middle of the movie. It'd be confusing as heck. So, if Gusteau were skinny, his ears would be in the correct place, thus making it a very horrific experience for the viewer, because the ears would be in such an unfamiliar spot to the point where it's just terrifying. Gusteau was purposefully designed to be a large figure to show that he's the bigger person in any situation. Shows compassion and love. These two traits are very important in any relationship. And as a result of Gusteau's bulbous stature, we see these traits reflected in his body. However, if Gusteau were tiny and skinny, then he would be violent. And if you're violent, you can't be in a relationship because that's called domestic abuse. And believe it or not, domestic abuse is not very good breeding material. Thus, Gusteau wouldn't have found a willing mate, and therefore, Linguini wouldn't have ever been born. Goodness, that was weird to record in public. In business, if your sign is small, then you have 3 problems. Less advertising, less successful, and less room for stars. As a result of this, Gusteau would not have been as famous. Without the fame that Gusteau carries, Remy probably wouldn't know about him. He's a rat. He only knows about him because he's on TV like a famous person. His partner probably wouldn't be as interested in him. Thus, no Linguini baby, little baby boy. You know what I mean, please. And then he probably wouldn't live in Paris, because if he doesn't have the fame, then he probably doesn't have as much money. And living in Paris is expensive, so he likely wouldn't even live there. Having a small sign is amongst the worst things, but it's not worse than this. Remy's dad would never understand the true colors of humans and the possibility of otherworldly expansion. Anton Ego would never change, never able to experience the love that he ever longs for in childhood. Collette would never find true love for bread. The rats would still be outcasts, even though they have proven importance for human society. Skinner would still be present, making the days of every chef miserable under his iron fist, creating a living hell. Thumb Guy's murderous rampage would be ongoing. Millions would suffer at the literal finger of a monster, and Linguini would never exist.
So I guess it's a good thing Gusteau isn't skinny? Dude, I recorded that at like 4 in the morning, except it was more like 2 in the morning, which was actually like 12. I don't know, man.